I was born August 19th, 1929 in Fillmore, Utah, at the home of my father's parents, John Lewis Brunson. And we only lived there for a month or two before we came back to Blackfoot, which was our home, but and my parents were living in Blackfoot before I was born, but they had just gone to Utah and was there just before I was born, and then I stayed we was there for maybe 3 weeks to a month after I was born. Then we come back to Blackfoot.
Okay, hold on for a second.
This is a picture of my grandparents, John Lewis Brunson and his wife Emma Jane Wilden Brunson. It's the only picture that I think that I have of them, and it's in my genealogy book. So I don't know how good that'll show up on the.
I think it'll show up okay, Dad.
On the film, but that's the only one I know of that I've got.
These are the ones you lived with when you were first born. You were born in their home.
Yes.
You moved away from their home. What did you do?
Well, we moved back to Blackfoot, and
back to Blackfoot. Dad had already lived there, Grandpa?
Yeah, they had lived in Blackfoot before they went down to Utah. My mother, before she married my dad, worked in a cafe in Blackfoot, and that's where they met. It was in this cafe, and they fell in love, and they got married, and then I don't know if my grandparents had ever met my mother before we went down to Utah or not, but anyway, we went down to Utah in about the latter part of July in 1929, and I was born the 19th of August, 1929, down there, and then we stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks, and or 4 weeks maybe, and then we come back to Blackfoot, and that's where we made our home. And my dad went to work as a contract painter, I think, at that time. He painted houses and just done general contract painting, which was quite seasonal.
And this is a picture of Grandma and Grandpa Brunson's parents. That's August Hofer and Sarah Louise Bernard. This was the 2nd of April 1909 in Salt Lake Temple. That's where they were married. Okay, Dad.
Well, what more do you want to know?
Well, tell me about your early recollections of your grandparents. That's your grandparents on both sides, your grandpa and grandma.
Well, I don't remember anything of my grandpa Hofer. He was killed before my mother married my dad. He was killed in 1924, I believe.
Okay.
He was run over with a wagon, horse and team with a wagon load of hay. I think it was in Gibson, where they had went to get hay, and so I never knew him. The only grandfather I knew was the one that my grandmother married after my grandfather died. His name was W.E. McMullen, William Eli McMullen. And he had 8 children, and his wife had died when they met, and he was working at the sugar factory in Blackfoot, and they met, and I don't know how they met, but my grandmother married him, and she had 6 children, and he had 8. So when they had the household together, they had 14 kids in the house, and they lived on Rich Lane, about 2 miles out of Blackfoot on Rich Lane at that time, and that's where they made their home, and that's where they lived until my mother got married in Do you have my mother's marriage date there when they
No.
got married?
We have access to all that. Now,
And-
is this your mother? It says August is holding Ruth. That's your mother.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Okay, I'm going to show another picture here. This is a picture of August Hofer holding Grandma Brunson, Grandma Ruth Hofer Brunson. That's it'd be August is holding Ruth, and I guess they called her Louie, didn't they? They called her Grandma Louie, didn't they?
yeah.
And she's holding James. That is Ruth's brother. That'd be your uncle.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, you told me that you remember going over there, over to Grandma McMillan's after she had, when she lived on Rich Lane, and you took care of the cows, didn't you?
Yes, we used to go out there, and they had access to. They had rented some property out about 3 or 4 miles past their home on Rich Lane, and we used to take the cows out there after we'd milked them at night, and they stayed there overnight, and then we'd bring them back the next morning, and then they'd milk them and stay there that day, and then we'd take them back out the next night, and that was they just trailed them up and down the road about it must have been 3 miles, and then we stayed out there in an old car body overnight, and then trailed the cows back with us the next morning.
Okay, this isn't the same farm, is it?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
This is Grandma Brunson's family, and it's Shep, Louie, Tom, Joseph, Jim, August, Ruth, and Reed are in that photograph. And this is on their farm in 1921. Then in 1931, here's a photograph that is Louie, Ray, and Alvin. That'd be Dad in that picture. That's probably one of the earliest pictures we have of Dad right there. He's the little guy. And then his mother is standing just to the right of him. That's Grandma Brunson with her brothers and sisters. Okay, and then what did you do when you... So, I'm sorry, did you say how far you took the cows?
Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 miles from the
pasture
homestead to the pasture.
To where you milked them. Okay.
And so that was pretty much what the kids. We did that for a short time, and then they got more and more out of the cattle business because it wasn't paying as much as the steady job working at the sugar factory. Even though they got laid off sometimes in the summer at the sugar factory, they was working part-time during shutdowns fixing up the machinery and everything. So Grandpa Mac was doing more and more work at the sugar factory in practically a year-round basis, and so they got out of the cattle business pretty much then, and just worked at the sugar factory until they moved into town. They lived out on Rich Lane.
Okay, now you said his name was William E. McMillan, right?
Yeah.
Willard E. McMillan. Okay, here's a photograph of Dad's grandpa.
This is the one I
It's the
always
one
called Grandpa.
he knew.
He was just like a grandpa to me, and he treated us like we was all his kids.
Now, in this picture, this is him. The older gentleman is Dad's grandpa, McMillan, and his son, Buddy. Okay, Dad. Anything else you want to tell us about Grandpa Mac?
No, I know he used to like to hunt and fish, and that was right up my dad's alley because he liked to hunt and fish, and so we went quite a bit together as a family.
Here's a photograph of them fishing on Island Park Reservoir in 1952. This is Bill and Louie here. Okay. So that Grandpa Brunson got along pretty well with Grandpa McMillan then, huh?
Yeah, we went fishing quite a bit together. I know a lot of summers we spent 2 or 3 weeks at a time up at a ranch on Big Lost River above Chile. And we used to call it was the people that owned the ranch at that time was Williams, and it was right by a measuring cable where they measured the water. The irrigation district measured the water that come down the Big Lost River at that point, and we used to fish up and down the river 2 or 3 miles on either side of that cable crossing, and it's still in existence. So I was up there a couple of years ago and looked at it, but the ranch has been changed now, and it's kind of a it's where they take out people for pack trips and everything. You know,
it's outfitters.
Outfitters deal.
Okay. All right. Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, they
How old were they when they're married?
My dad was about 13 or 14 years older than my mother when they got married. And
it's Grandpa Brunson. This is Grandma Brunson.
And they had their ups and downs, I believe, but I think they got along pretty good. But they had one of the problems they had was my dad was a house painter, and of course you can't paint houses when it's windy, or especially on the outside, and you can't do much when the weather's inclement, and it's awful hard to paint on the inside when the weather's really inclement, because you can't empty the house so that you can paint on the inside either, because people need to be inside when it's snowy and cold and wintry. So that made it so my dad was out of work a lot of times during the winter when we really needed more than we had to have in the summertime. So my mother went to work at first she worked in potato warehouses in the wintertime, which really supplemented our income quite a bit, and then she worked, and then Dad could work in the summertime, and us kids all worked from the time we was big enough to walk practically to supplement the family income. We went out on farms and picked potatoes and hoed beets and hoed the weeds out of them, and when I was about 13 or 14 is when I first started working on a farm, and I worked for a fellow by the name of Harry Klusner, and he lived about I imagine it was about 8 or 10 miles west of Idaho Falls, just a ways past Moreland or Rockford, not neither one of those places. It was just about 8 or 10 miles past what is it out there? Moreland.
Yeah.
It's Moreland.
Okay.
That's where they was at, and I worked there for 2 or 3 years and stayed right out there and worked on the farm, helped them cultivate crops and all summer long. Then I'd just go home in the wintertime to go to school.
Okay.
So I worked out there for 3 or 4 years, and then 3 or 4 years I worked for Harry Klusner's son-in-law, Joe Peters, and I stayed out there, and then I worked back and forth on both farms. Joe Peters lived at the end of McDonaldville Road, and that's about 6 or 7 miles north of Blackfoot on the Groveland Road.
Now, where did you live at this time? You were living there on Doble?
Yeah, we lived there all our lives practically.
Oh, did you? When did Dad buy that property? You remember? You don't know, do you?
I've got a contract of when he bought the property, and he bought it. I don't know exactly when he bought it, but I think he paid $54 for it. And
this is Grandpa Brunson and two of his brothers. Almy is
the extreme
sitting down, and
George.
And George. Oh, okay. George Brunson
standing up.
is standing next to Grandpa. Grandpa's the one in the white shirt on the left. Okay. Now, so when you as a child, you lived there on West Doble and Blackfoot.
Yeah, we was. I don't remember where we lived down between the rivers by my Uncle Bert's place. We lived down there, but we didn't live down there very long, and we moved into and rented a spot on the corner of Doble and oh, I don't remember the name of that street either. But anyway,
Right.
we lived there one winter, and we lived in a tent. We just had wooden sides up 4 foot on a big tent. And the next spring, we bought this property where the house is now, and my dad had a friend of his that he knew towed our tent up to that property. We had a floor in it,
Plywood floor?
just a wood floor, stringers with wood floor, no plywood,
Oh, okay.
just a wood floor. And then we towed that up with a team of horses up to where our property was, and we lived in that for 2 or 3 winters and 2 or 3 years, and Dad finally got it built up so it was wood, a solid wood house, frame house. And then us boys lived in the back of the house. We stayed in the back of the house in the tent. That's where we slept for I don't know how many winters we slept in the tent, or how many summers and winters we slept in the tent, but we slept out there, and the girls slept in the house
With Grandma
with Grandma and Grandpa.
Now, so if you're living in a kind of a temporary shelter thing, you didn't have any indoor plumbing.
No, they didn't have indoor plumbing in the house until
Till you returned from the service, wasn't it? Didn't you help them put in the plumbing?
I helped them put in the indoor plumbing in that other house, the
Oh.
bathroom. They had the hot water and they had cold water in there, but they didn't have a bathroom in there.
Okay.
And then when I come back from the service in 1952, I helped them put the bathroom in.
Oh, they had an outhouse until then.
Yeah.
So how did you get water?
We had a line that come into the property and an outside faucet, and the first 2 or 3 years we didn't have any water on the property, and I carried it from some people that lived across our lot, and I carried it summer and winter in a bucket across the lot, and that's what we used for water.
They had a well.
No, they had city water, and there was city water in the alley.
Oh, there was it was
but we
available.
just didn't have it. Yeah.
Okay.
So and then I don't remember when we dug the trench out, but we got the water in the house into the house, and then we still never had it in the house. But we had it in so that we just had to go outside and get our water. We didn't have to bucket it any distance then. And then we moved it into the house, and we just had a cold water faucet in the house. And of course, you had to be over 3 foot deep with the water line, or else it'd freeze up. Mm-hmm. So that's what we was careful to keep the water line deep so that it didn't freeze up in the wintertime. And then we had water in the house, and then I don't think we ever had hot water in that house, but we did have an electric stove, one of the first electric stoves in the area, in that one-room house with my brothers and sisters and my mother and dad.
Okay. Now, did your dad do anything to supplement his income in the winter?
Yeah, he tried to. He tried to work in the sugar factory, and he did work at the sugar factory for a few years. And then he, I think it was 41, he slid off of a roof. He was painting a roof for his brother-in-law, Dave McMullen. That was, and that house was on University too. And he was painting the roof with oil, linseed oil, and graphite. At that time, they used that to soak the roofs, which were all shingles at that time. They didn't have fiberglass shingles, they had wood shingles, so they treated them with graphite and linseed oil. Okay. And he stepped back, and he had a paint gun that had a hose, an air hose, so that he could spray the oil and graphite on the roof, and he stepped on that hose and lost his balance and fell off of the roof and broke his ankle, and after that he was crippled in his ankle because they thought they had real modern technology, and they set his ankle using a fluoroscope, and then they they didn't pin it or anything, they just set it, and then they put it in a cast and put a pin through his upper leg but just below his knee, and he was able to walk on it. But he was allergic to what they painted his leg with, and so after about 6 or 8 days his leg started rotting, and they had to cut the cast off. And when they did, they cut the cast off, and the bones in his ankle hadn't knitted strong enough, and so they slipped out of place, and so he was walking on top of one of his foot bones, and he was a cripple the rest of his life because of that.
There's a picture of him. This would have had to been probably late 60s or early 70s. The date on the picture says September 73, but that's when it was developed, no telling when it was taken. That pickup there is Dad's 67, wasn't it? 67 Chevy pickup?
No, it was 64.
Oh, that's twice I've got that wrong. I think the rear end in the picture there is Dad. It's Grandpa. Clarence Alvin. But that's Dad's father. Okay. Now, didn't you say that he trapped too to finally supplement his income?
Yeah, we trapped out on the buttes, trapped bobcats and coyotes, and that was before the highway went from Idaho Falls to Arco, and the road didn't go straight out of Blackfoot past Moreland either. You had to go out through Riverside, and then you went over to Moreland, and then you went to Tabor. But you could go out the back of Moreland, and you'd be on the back roads and the roads that was just put in there by trappers and people that was out there herding sheep. Sheep herders had at least a lot of that ground, and we, as a matter of fact, got some money from some of the sheep herders, because if we trapped coyotes around their herds, well, then they'd pay us a bounty for the amount that we got by their herds. So, and we did that for 3 or 4 or 5 years and made good money, especially in the winter time, trapping coyotes and bobcats. And
was the bounty as profitable as the hide, as the pelt?
Yeah, the bounty was real profitable. I don't even remember how much we got bounty, but it seemed like we got $12 bounty from the sheep owners for each coyote, and then we got $12 bounty from the state, because they paid you, and you had to show all 4 feet to get $12 bounty.
Wow. For
coyotes and bobcats. At that time they was considered pests and predators, and they was predated on the cattle and the sheep, and so they got a lot of support from the cattlemen and the sheep herders for the state to pay bounty on the animals. And then you also got so much for the hides. The hides was really valuable at that time because they'd be in their prime, and you'd get quite a bit of money for the hides. I don't remember how much we was getting at that time, but I know we made pretty good money trapping coyotes and bobcats. And our route went out between the Twin Buttes and around the Big Butte, the ones that the TV cameras and everything, or the TV antennas are on now, is where we trapped a lot of bobcats and coyotes out in there. And at that time there was also some wild horses out in there.
This is Grandpa Brunson, right here, and Grandma Brunson, and the big kid is his dad, Clarence Alvin Brunson, and then the others that'd be Dolly and Winona. Is that right? Are they the next two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Owen
and Dick were later. Okay. So how did you get back and forth to your trap lines? I mean, out to the Big Buttes is what, 30 miles or?
Yeah, we had
20 miles.
Model B Ford pickup, which was the updated version of a Model A Ford pickup, and that's what we used to take out there around the trap line. And of course, there wasn't any service stations or anything out there, so when you left, you had to carry enough gas to get out there and back, and you had to, if something happened while you was out there, well, you had to be enough self-sufficient to get the outfit running, or else you had to walk back. You fixed your own flat tires when you was out there, and so we had a pump and everything else. All those
Pack the
things
tire pump with you, and
all those things that you don't see in cars anymore, we had.
well, the tires were simpler to repair too, right?
Yeah, but they, by the same token, they weren't near as good as the tires that you had today.
Yeah.
And of course the early 40s and along in that time was the war effort was going on, and they were starting to clamp down on, you couldn't get tires because it was all going towards the military.
Mm-hmm.
And gasoline was hard to get too. But of course we got a lot of support from the sheep herders. They helped us as much as they could whenever we would be out there. Of course, they didn't have anything as far as parts or anything for cars or gasoline, but they'd help you keep your outfits running so that you could keep it going. Most of the time, they'd have some kind of jacks or something like that if you had trouble and had to jack it up and you was in a bad place or something. But I don't remember having any real problems out there, except one time we was out there, I remember, in a lightning storm, and it was just really a banging all around us, and we was on an old power line road, and so we couldn't see to go. That was when they had windshield wipers that you had to hand operate, and so you couldn't see anything and operate a windshield wiper with one hand and try and see. So we stopped the car, and of course it was leaking all over on us, but when the storm passed, we got out, and we had only missed getting hit by a lightning bolt about 40 yards or so. A light pole or a power pole had been shattered by lightning just up the road right ahead of where we was stopped. So
wow.
We felt pretty lucky about that. We knew it was hitting close because you could feel it, and the ground would just shake. And
was it a convertible top type?
No,
outfit?
but they didn't.
But they didn't hold the water.
They just had doors, on them to hold you from falling out pretty near it. They weren't airtight like they are nowadays.
Okay.
You'll have to look at some of those old Model A Ford pickups and see what they look at.
All right.
To see what kind of doors you had, if you can find an original one.
Well, you did that for winters. Now, how long was your trap line? How long did it take you to walk
Well,
the trap line?
it took us usually 3 or 4 days to go the trap line, so I didn't get to go very often in the wintertime unless it was right around Christmas, when we used to get out a few days for Christmas. I don't remember, but I know we trapped in the worst part of the winter because that was when the hides was worth the most money.
Mm-hmm. So Grandpa would leave, go out, and it'd take him 3 or 4 days. It must take him a week to be gone then.
Yeah, he'd be gone. Him and Uncle George come up and went with him for a couple of years too, and they trapped together. And so they wasn't alone out there. Well, they was alone, but I mean, they was with one another.
Well, how'd they sleep out on the desert in the middle of the winter?
Just had blankets, and we had tarps, and just lay down on. We didn't have no sleeping bags or anything like that. You just people weren't as soft as they are nowadays, I guess.
Well, was there water out there that you could get to? I imagine
Yeah,
there was if they were
there was.
watering their
We
sheep.
could get water at all of these sheep camps, and whenever we'd go past a sheep camp, well, then we'd get water at wherever they had their. They had those, a lot of those, and our trap line went to go to those places where they had those windmills, and whenever the wind would blow, it'd pump water up into these tanks, and if it blew too long and got too much water, well, the tanks would just overflow. But at least they would. They had a
They'd
tank.
go whenever the wind blew.
Mm-hmm. So,
Summer or winter?
summer or winter.
Wow.
So those old pump jacks, at that time when the wind stopped blowing, the water leaked back down into the ground. So when it got down below 4 or 5 feet, well, then it didn't freeze or anything. And the pump jacks, the way that they worked, they lifted up a couple of 3 cups of water, and then they went back down, and then they lifted up another couple of 3 cups of water. And then when they went down, the check valve closed so that the water didn't go down with the pump when it went back down. So then gradually the pump would get up to the top of the ground, and then it'd spill out into the tank that they was filling, and then when of course when the wind quit blowing and the pump quit pumping, well, then there was a hole in the bottom of the check valve that eventually would drain that water back down.
Small hole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess I always figured the water was real deep out there on the desert.
Well, we didn't get the deep water. We just got the surface water, but a lot of the water was deep out there.
Right.
But there was, I don't remember all of the exact places where the pumps were, but they was all around out there on the desert. If you knew the area, well, then you knew where the pumps were.
All right. What other kind of things did you guys do for? I know you hunted ducks and geese a lot.
Yeah, we supplemented our. Us kids was practically raised on wild meat. We had. My dad, when us kids was little, didn't hunt deer very much or elk, but he hunted geese and ducks. And I know we had ducks and geese, and we didn't have freezers at that time, but we would clean them and take care of them, and then we would hang them by their feet upside down in a flour sack underneath the eaves of the house on the north side of the house, and they'd stay frozen, and they'd keep all winter long like that. So
And when you needed some,
when we needed one, we'd just go out and get a sack with what we needed in it and bring it in the house and eat it. And we canned, in the summertime, we canned peas and we canned carrots and beans and all that kind of stuff, and we had them in a dugout that we had underneath the house, and we had a stairways down to it.
Like a root cellar.
Just like a root cellar. It was right underneath the house, and that's where we kept all of our fruit and our vegetables that we canned.
So you only hunted in the winter then, mostly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
when you could take care of the
I
meat.
guess by today's standards, they'd probably take all of us kids away from our parents, because that would probably be considered cruel and unusual punishment. But we didn't think nothing of it. I think we probably did as much whining as the kids today do when they have to go to bed anyway. But I know we wrapped. We had an old iron. We each had an iron that we heated up on the stove, and then we wrapped it in paper, and then put it in a sock, and we used that to warm our beds up until we got in it, and then after it warmed the beds up and we got in it, we kept it warm. I guess.
Yeah, didn't you tell me you heated rocks too?
Yeah, we did warm rocks too, and
wrap
them in paper, and they'd hold their heat good too.
Put them in the bottom of your bed.
Yeah. Well, we put them in the bottom. That'd entice you to stretch out in your bed a little bit. Otherwise, you'd cuddle up like a turtle.
All right.
And we had the dog that always slept on the bottom of our beds too. And that kind of always helped keep us warm. And I guess we felt like we wasn't threatened in any way as long as we had the dog there. And he never did. He was always alert. And as long as I can remember, we had the dog. And so.
Well, now Grandma and Grandpa had a really big garden. I'm assuming they had that all the time you were growing up.
Yeah, we all had 2 or 3 rows in that garden that we had to take care of, and so that was part of our summer chores, was to take care of the garden, especially until I went out and worked on the farm. Well, that's what I did all summer long. My mother would go out with us kids after we had breakfast and everything, and we worked in the garden all summer long. All of us kids worked in the garden. As far as I don't think anybody got out of it.
Yeah.
We had a lot of weeding to do, and it was a big garden by today's standards, I believe.
Yeah, I remember it. It had to be half acre.
Well, it seemed like it was 20 acres when you was weeding in it. A long ways to the end of the row.
Well, they had fruit trees all the way around the garden.
Yeah, we had fruit trees. We had peach trees around the garden that we got peaches out of, and that's hard to believe that we got peaches down there, but we got quite a few peaches out of our trees in Blackfoot. We had them in the fair lots of years. Had distributed them or showed them in the fair down at the Eastern Idaho State Fair, and I think that we was busy all the time working on the garden and all of our other things that we did.
Trying to support yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You were self-sufficient. You didn't have to buy food, did you?
No, we never had to buy food, and there wasn't any welfare. We all had to live on what we had, and so I think that as far as I knew, all of the people at that time, they canned and they were all self-sufficient that way.
That's pretty incredible comparing to what we have today.
What we have today as far as welfare today.
Well, tell me some of your early memories with your family. Did you guys camp? Now you said you went to Island Park and fished.
We went to Island Park. We went up to above Chile, up on the Lost River, and we never, in those days, we never had a tent. We just we cut a tree down to use for a ridge pole, and then we used that every time we went up there. We stashed it right there, and then when we'd go back, we'd fish it back out, and we'd use that for a ridge pole all the time. And
you had a big canvas or something you threw over it?
It had a big tarp that we threw over it, so it was open on both ends. So if it rained, well, then the one on the rainy end got wet.
The angle of the wind, huh?
Yeah. I know lots of nights and lots of days that we stood around a campfire and dried one side while the other side got wet. So.
Well, now, I also remember you telling me a few stories about Grandpa and his old truck, and you wanting to. I'm going to ask you to tell a few stories. I'm going to ask you to tell some of the ones I can remember. Tell me about the story where you put water in the gas tank.
Oh, I was. I guess I was about 9 or 10 years old, and that was just after we had got the faucet up to the house, but it wasn't in the house yet. But we had it sticking up out of the ground, out a ways away from the house, and we had it insulated so that it didn't freeze up in the wintertime. But anyway, we all wanted to go fishing, and Dad said, well, we couldn't go fishing. His gas tank was empty, and so I went out there and I filled the gas tank with water, and I told him it was full. So that didn't make him happy at all. But those days, cars was made a lot more so that you could take care of them too, and they had a drain plug in them, and so all you had to do was take the drain plug out and let the water drain out. It'd go to the bottom of the gasoline and let it drain out until the gasoline started coming, and then
put the plug back in.
So,
okay.
So we got through that pretty easy, and I don't remember whether we got to go fishing or not, because it took it took us long enough to do all that by the time we got it all done, it was too late to leave, I believe. So we never got to go fishing, but I thought we could go.
Well, now
At that time, when we went fishing, we'd put our mattresses and tie it on top of the car and bedding inside and tie the mattresses on top and what had to be tied on top with them, and that's the way we went fishing.
threw the Dutch oven in, and
Yeah.
okay. Well, your brothers were. You had two sisters just younger than you.
Well, the way it turned out, I was born first, and then my sister Winona was born 2 years later, and then my brother Owen was born 2 years after that, and then Dick was born 2 years after that, and then Donna was born last.
Oh, so that one picture that I showed here, that must be. I must have that wrong. That must be Owen sitting on Grandma's lap.
Well, yeah, if you can't tell otherwise, it probably is.
Yeah, here, let me show this picture again. This picture shows Grandma and Grandpa Brunson, and then Dad, and then Winona, and then that must be Owen on Grandma's lap.
Yeah.
All right. What kind of things did you guys do for fun, for games, and to entertain yourselves?
Well, in the summertime, we played a lot in the field there. We played ball, and we played a lot of run sheep you run and all of those kind of games. And in the wintertime, we played, well, of course, we went skating. We went ice skating quite a bit, and we went sledding a lot. I remember we used to braid a rope into one of Grandma's horse's tails. We'd braid the rope in the tail, and then that horse would pull us behind on this toboggan. And there was room for about 4 or 5 of us on this toboggan. And I think the horse got as much fun out of tipping us and pulling us, and then she'd go on a corner or something and tip us all off in the snow, and we'd laugh and get back up. It had it wasn't much more than just a board that I think it was a real toboggan, and it had a rope nailed onto that you held between your legs, and then you sit on it, and then your feet went up around whoever was sitting in front of you, and they had a rope that they held onto too, and then the horse pulled it, and we had a lot of fun with that.
How'd you steer the horse, or did you just let it run?
Well, there was a guy riding the horse that he'd try to tip us off, you know, and then you'd have to dodge the snowballs coming off of the horse's feet too, and of course we did that up and down the roads at that time, but there wasn't near the traffic that there is now on the roads. But we just had a lot of fun doing that. I don't remember ever doing any ice fishing much like we do now. As far as winter sports, we just hunted geese and ducks and that, and then we tried to make it through the winter.
You spent most of your time trying to.
Us kids went to school all the time, and then my mother worked in the potato warehouse in the early days, and then she started. She figured that was too hard to work, and it was. So she got some schooling, and she went to work as a nurse, and she worked as a nurse from then on. She retired from the State Hospital South. She was a nurse at State Hospital South, I believe, when she retired. And she was just 65 when she retired, so that was in 1975 that she retired, and she died a year later, but she only enjoyed about a month of her retirement.
Before she was diagnosed with cancer.
Before she had a brain tumor, which was diagnosed as malignant, and so for all practical purposes she was dead then. But we tried to do everything we could to get her over it. We had chemotherapy and everything, but it won out. And the brain tumor grew back so big. After they operated and took it out the first time, it grew back in less than a year, bigger than what it was, and it caused her to, it pinched the nerve, the optic nerve in her brain, and caused her to go blind. And then she kind of lost her mind a little bit, got childish.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, tell me a little bit about your early schooling. You have a one-room schoolhouse in Blackfoot that you went to as
Well,
in
we
grade
went
school?
we went to school. I went to school at Irving in Blackfoot. That's where I went the first 6 years, and we had to walk about a half a mile to school to Irving. And then after that, I went to the high school, which was across the railroad tracks, not too far from the courthouse. And we had to walk about a mile. They didn't have no buses in them days. But in the wintertime, I worked in a cafe washing dishes. For my dinner, I washed dishes during lunch hour and for my dinner, and then at night I washed dishes for 3 or 4 hours to make a few dollars. And I delivered papers too in 1940 and 39 and 40 and 41. I delivered papers for the Post Register. I was the Post Register's representative in Blackfoot for those years. In 1941, the year the war broke out, I got the most new subscriptions in my district and won a bicycle from the Post Register, which was the only new bicycle that I ever had. It was a brand new one, a brand new Elgin bicycle. And I remember my mother helped me quite a bit.
She helped you deliver your papers?
Yeah, she got me out and got me enthused to deliver them, because at that time, in the wintertime, that particular year, we had 20 and 30 below zero temperatures and everything, and it took quite a bit of guts for somebody to deliver papers. I'd get my papers in the evening and had to deliver them, and of course there was snow, and there was a lot of snow, and then I had the whole Blackfoot area, so I was delivering papers all over town, and so I know that if she wouldn't have helped me, I wouldn't have made it.
Then after you got done with your delivering papers, you started working on local farms.
Yeah. After that, I started working on farms when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I worked the summers on farms, and then in the winter times, of course, I went to school and I worked in where I could to make a little bit of money. I had a car when I was only about 15 when I had my first car. Of course, I drove it out to work when I worked on the farms, and then, of course, we never went anywhere after I got out there, but I drove it to school sometimes, and that was, I was trying to think, I think it was a 32 or a 33 Chevrolet. I bought it from Tom Smith in Blackfoot at Blackfoot Motors, and I see he's still selling cars at Blackfoot Motors. Of course, he's the owner now, but he's still there, and he still remembers me.
Well, you already described what it was like growing up in the Depression for you. Did you realize the circumstances? How the
Well, that was just after the Depression. I think the Depression was in the late
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah, it lasted from basically the whole 30s
Yeah.
was. I think the Depression started in about the year you were born.
And I know that it wasn't only just the Depression. I think that all of the people at that time, they depended on themselves to sustain themselves. And so if a person didn't have a lot, well, they had a bigger tendency to save all that they could, and if they had half a bushel of beans, well, they canned it and put it away for winter. And that's what we did. We canned vegetables all the time, and we canned peaches and fruit, all different kinds, apples. A lot of my aunts and uncles had farms and they had a lot more apples than they could ever eat, so we got a lot of apples from them and canned them, and it was always pretty near always was my job to run the apple peeler, and then I could peel as many apples as a couple of 3 people could core and pick out the bad spots in them, and then we'd put them in jars and then we'd can them, cook them. And in those earlier days in the fall, we canned on a stove that we had outside, and we had a big tub, and we used shingles to make a double boiler out of it, and then we'd put quart bottles on the bottom and fill it up to the lids with water and start heating it, and then we'd put wooden shingles on the tops of those bottles and put another layer of bottles on there, and then we'd can them. And I don't remember, it seems like we had to can them for about 40 minutes, I think. I can't remember.
Would you cook them for that long?
Cook them get them to a rolling boil, and then it was usually my job to keep them hot enough so that they was at a rolling boil until they was cooked, as long as they had to be.
Okay.
And we had to keep them covered with water.
This is a photograph of Dad when he was about 15 years old, and he's the one on the right, and his school friend, high school friend. You said his name is Francis Fields?
Yes, Francis Fields was his name.
Okay. Well, tell me about the jobs you had then. Didn't you? The job you took in Alabama, was that before you went in service?
No,
we don't talk about that yet.
I went on and graduated from high school, and then I went into the service in 1947 when I graduated from high school, and I was in the service from then until 1952, and I was held 1 year in the service at the convenience of the government because they couldn't find a replacement for me at my particular job duty, and
Which
so
was?
I was a machinist, but I was also in charge of a big machine shop, and I had about 12 or 14 German machinists that had been in the service too. They was Army people for the most part too, but so I was interpreting the work that they needed to do along with the GIs that I was over in this machine shop, and so they couldn't find a a replacement that could speak German and keep the shop going and take care of the GIs at the same time. And so they kept me for a year longer. President Truman signed a year's extension on my service, so I had to serve an extra year in the service. And I come home in 1952, and when I come home I went to work, after I got out of the service I went to work for the Naval Ordnance Plant as a machinist. Well, first I guess I went to work as a machinist at Pocatello shipyards. I was a machinist in the machine shop for the locomotives. We did all the machine work and that kind of stuff on for locomotives, and then we took them apart and put them back together. Now these was steam locomotives, but right about that time they was phasing out the steam locomotives and going to diesel, and so they was going to be closing down those shops there. So I got laid off at the Pocatello Railroad shops, and so then I found a job working as a machinist at the Naval Ordnance Plant there, and I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and then I went to work for Joe Peters, who I had worked for as a kid, and he was living in Hereford, Texas at that time, but he wanted me to come and help him plant a bunch of acres of potatoes in Mobile, Alabama. So that's what I did. I went down and I was below Mobile, Alabama, between Mobile, Alabama and Pensacola, Florida, at a place called Foley. There's just a little kind of a hamlet there right along the Gulf Coast. As a matter of fact, we fished in the Gulf, and when we wasn't working, that was really something. We went down there about the 15th of January, and the snow was up to your waist around here, and when we got down there we started planting potatoes the 20th of January and planted them between the rows of the trees down there and out in the fields too. But we planted potatoes right in them. They raised 3 crops down there in Foley, Alabama, and so they had a crop of these trees, which were nut trees. I think they were pecan trees, but the farmer raised pecans, and then when the leaves and all of the pecans was picked off of them, well, then in January they planted potatoes right along in between the trees because they didn't have any leaves or anything on them, and so the sun and everything would get down through there, and they had long days, and they raised good potatoes down there. And we had a bumper crop of potatoes until we got ready to start digging them, and we started digging them on about the 15th of May. Okay, we was going to dig these potatoes on May the 15th, and I think we dug them, and we was sorting them and everything, and shipping them to the market. And they were potatoes that had to be marketed right as quick as you dug them. And it started to rain, and it rained for 3 or 4 days after we got stopped digging, and it made it so that we couldn't dig for another 3 or 4 days, and it had just about get dry enough so as we could start digging, and then it'd rain again, and it done that until it rotted all of every acre we had, rotted them right there in the field. Wow. 450 acres. And then the ones that we dug in between times that we tried to dig when we thought it was dry enough and get to the market, they'd rot and start running out of the potato cars before we could get them to market. So we lost money on them after paying for shipping them and handling them and sorting them and everything, and then they rotted in the cars before they could get them to market. So that was a total loss. So The potatoes rotted, so that was the end of my job, so I come home. And I brought 2 watermelon with me when I come home. You want to turn that off now?
I think Grandma's going to get it.
It's probably for me.
So that was the end of your job. You brought home
Yeah,
some...
so I brought home 2 watermelons, and I had 2 watermelons, and I had 112 pounds of watermelon. One of them weighed 53 pounds, and one of them weighed over 60 pounds. I had them in the fender wells of my car when I come home, and they was the best. They was really good eating watermelon, but that's the biggest watermelons they'd ever seen in Blackfoot at that time.
I remember you saying something about putting one of them in Grandma's fridge.
Yeah, put it in the fridge to cool it, and it caved the shelves right out of it. We couldn't set them on the shelves, so we just ended up putting them in the gunny sack and putting them in the shade to cool. That worked pretty good. Took ice out of the fridge and put on them
to get them chilled.
So as we could eat them. But they was really good.
Okay. Well, let's talk just a little bit more about the service. I'm going to show some pictures.
Okay.
Okay, this is a picture of Dad in Germany. Found a little girl with I think it's a girl.
Yeah, with a scooter.
With a scooter.
I don't remember where it is, but it's you can see that it's cobblestone streets.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's the kind they had over there.
All right, we'll do the next picture.
Okay.
There's Dad on the ship.
Going to Germany.
Okay.
This is in '47, and that other picture must have been in the camp in.
All right. There's a picture of Dad sitting. They have grass in Germany.
No, I think that's in the camp before we left.
Oh, okay.
Because I still got PFC
Bars on there.
bars on.
Okay.
But I had them on for a while too, because I think I was a PFC even after I got over there, because I was a PFC when I went to school.
Here's Grandpa with the what car do you think it is, Dad?
It's a 41 Buick, 1941 Buick in Germany.
Okay. Now, what did you do in the service?
I was in engineer corps, and I was a machinist. I went to school to be a machinist, and that's what I was a machinist.
Now, this was after the fighting was over, because you said you went over in '47, right?
I went over in, '47.
And the war got over in '45.
Yeah, or 45.
End of '45, wasn't it? Okay. Now, it looks like you're in some kind of a camp there.
Yeah, I'm in some kind of a...
Fence behind you.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's some kind of a statue there in Germany.
Yeah.
With a bunch of your buddies.
Now, that must have been after I was made staff sergeant, so I don't know what time that was, but anyway, it was later.
What's this car?
Yeah, that's one of those. I don't know what kind it was, but it's a German car.
Oh, that's a Beetle. It's a Volkswagen Beetle.
It might be.
Maybe it was before they were invented.
It might have been an early model.
Okay. That piece of equipment there, Dad.
Well, that's a big grader.
Oh.
And,
oh yeah, I can see that now.
We disassembled it, and any parts that need to be machined, well, they brought in and we machined it. After that, I was put in a machine shop. After I got to where I was doing that, well, then they promoted me up to a shop, and I worked in there, and then I was in charge of it.
There you are, taking a little swim.
Yeah, that's probably in the Rhine River in Germany.
Now, is that next picture there? Is that with your...
Yeah, that's...
This is Dad's first wife. And you married her in Germany, is that correct?
Yes. Her name was Tamara Kartlovs. Kartlovs.
Let me see if I can get that a little better. I tried to zoom on it and it really snapped out of funny focus. There we go. Okay. Now, could she speak English?
Broken English.
There she is. She spoke broken English. How did you meet her?
I met her in a USO dance type of a deal. Camp.
All right, now you say she was not German.
No, she was a Latvian. She belonged to Latvia, and those were the first states that was overrun by Germany. Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. That's the Baltic states.
I remember.
So that's where she was from, and so she was a displaced person.
She was like a refugee in Germany.
She didn't have any affiliation with anybody.
Okay. Again. In her wedding dress. And then, there's Dad. Smirk on his face. Well, did they speak German in Latvia? Again, she was 12 or 13 when she was uprooted.
But
so she spoke German then.
She spoke pretty good German, yeah.
So she also spoke her native tongue then too. All right, there she is again. Hey, what's this, Dad?
That's the White Cliffs of Dover that you see when you go in the English Channel. Before you get to Bremen, Germany, you go past those White Cliffs of Dover. That's what they was called.
Got some kind of a tanker there?
Yeah.
All right. Now, didn't you play football in the military too?
Yes, I did. I played tackle and for Army, and that was so we had all of the different organizations around there supplied football players for the team, you know, and then we played all around Germany. And
who'd you play against?
Played against other Army teams.
Oh. Okay.
And we just had our own tournament over there in Germany.
I think I remember you telling me you were the littlest guy on the team.
Yeah, I was the littlest guy. I only weighed 220 or 25 pounds, and I brought our line total down from about 300 to about 250.
You alone, huh?
Yeah, pretty near. We had some big guys on the line.
Wow. You had also played football in high school, didn't you?
Yeah, I had played football a little bit in high school, but
for Blackfoot
for
High
Blackfoot High.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the military? You never saw any action as far as there's no fighting going on?
No, I never saw any fighting. I got over there in what they called the repatriation of Germany, and as what we did was just clean up all of the equipment that they had over there that was scattered around, and
did we rebuild buildings, rebuild the country?
Yeah, we did. We put the equipment to work, or put the equipment in condition so it could work, and then they used it to rebuild the cities, you know, and to get the rubble and everything out and to rebuild it. And where I was at in Hanau, we made a lot of playground equipment for schools, and we'd go around and dedicate that to the schools. And so we done about, I don't remember how many different bunches of playground equipment that we took to the schools and set it up, and then we'd have a little dedication of some kind, and I translated it to German so that they could so that they knew where it come from and what it was there for, and for them to enjoy it.
You spoke pretty fluently.
Yeah, I spoke pretty fluent German. As a matter of fact, I got put in jail one time for impersonating an American. I was a German impersonating an American, they said, and my birth certificate missed one number on it, and so I had to stay in jail until the Red Cross could get that straightened out. They had to call back and go to Utah and go to the people that knew me and everything. I don't know what all they had to do to get verification that
you wasn't a German.
Prove that I wasn't German or anything. And I don't know, German come real easy to me, and I didn't have any trouble talking it. But right now, I couldn't hold on a conversation in German anymore, I don't think.
Well, now, did somebody just say, hey, I think they heard you speaking German, and they just said that
I don't know what I don't know how come they got tipped off to it, because everybody knew that I was I was in charge of that shop, and I had German prisoners of war. They were prisoners of war, but then they was released because they was just soldiers, and then I had them in there. They was machinists, and so then I was giving them work and laying them out work, what to do and how to do it. And
so you had Germans working for you?
Yeah, I'm about 14 or 15.
Well, I guess I don't understand. Why would they be concerned about a German? I mean, were they concerned about infiltration into the military still from Germany?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that they just figured that I was impersonating an American.
Huh.
I don't know why.
So you had to spend how long in jail? Do you remember?
Oh, 4 or 5 days.
Till they got it all straightened out and figured out you was from Utah, not from.
Yeah, that I was born in Utah.
Okay.
And I had I had my appendix taken out in Germany while I was over there too. I had an appendicitis attack, and that's about all it was. I met and married my first wife in Germany, and
you brought her back with you.
She was quite a partier. She liked to do a lot of parties, and that was the reason that we didn't get along too good, because she liked to party too much, and I guess I could tolerate it over there, but when I got back home, I didn't like it, and
so she drank a lot?
She drank quite a bit, and I'd go to work and I'd come home and she'd be almost drunk, and she didn't care whether she had anything ready to eat or anything. And of course I was working 2 jobs trying to get ahead, and when I'd come home, well, she was drinking it all, and so
that didn't work out very well. How long?
That didn't work out too well, and we only stayed married maybe a year or so after we got in the States. And then we divorced. We decided that we'd split the sheets, and we didn't have any children, and I don't know, there wasn't supposed to be anything wrong why we couldn't have any children, but we just never had any. And so as long as we couldn't get along and we was having a lot of trouble, well, we just decided to get divorced, and we did. And she went back to New Jersey or Philadelphia, and she married somebody back there, and I don't remember what his name was, but now he is dead, and so she's alone back there, I think. But she does have other acquaintances back there of his.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're back home after a year, and then you got a divorce, and
yeah.
Was that about the time you went on ahead and met Mom again?
Yeah, that's when I got myself acquainted with my first love, and when I went to Germany, well, we just fell apart somehow, and we quit riding back and forth. Everybody thinks somebody else was the reason for it, but whatever the reason, we didn't stay together, and so she married somebody else. But after I got divorced from Vera, we called her, well then I started to thinking about her, and I knew that she was divorced, or was between marriages anyway. She wasn't married anymore with her first husband, because I think I seen Arvy. Arvy was working at the railroad at that time, when I was working at the railroad, and he told me that she was getting divorced, and so I looked her up, and she was still divorced, and so we started going back together, and then we got married.
Now she had Terry and Corinne.
Yeah, she had two. She had Terry and Corinne when we got married, and then we had Burdette.
Okay.
That's when our family started with Burdette, and I think Clarice was next,
Okay.
and so on. You got all that information from Mom, right?
Well, I did, but it doesn't mean you can't tell us anything.
I don't know anything about it.
All right.
She raised the kids, and I worked pretty much most of the time, but we did go do a lot of things together. We went camping a lot, and we went fishing, and we went hunting a lot together as a family, especially on the weekends. I never did have any problem getting work. I was working as a machinist for Earl Tanner when Burdette was born, and when Burdette was born, well, the day after he was born, I went back to work, and Earl Tanner laid me off because he had some boys that was coming home from a mission, and he didn't. He wanted to have a job for them, and so he laid me off. And of course, you know, Burdette was born on
just before Christmas.
Just before Christmas, and so that meant I was laid off just before Christmas, and had to find a job. But I didn't have any trouble getting a job working in a potato warehouse, and then I went to work for Custom Body Works building truck bodies, and then I went to work for Belleville's. And
Was it after that you started your own business then?
Yeah.
Okay. And all that time you lived in Blackfoot.
Yeah, we lived in Blackfoot out in Groveland.
You originally had a home right next to Grandma and Grandpa, didn't you? Just a couple doors away?
No.
Oh. You lived out in Groveland.
We lived out in Groveland. That Vera and I bought that place, and then when we got divorced, I had to keep that and pay for it.
Okay.
And I paid her for her share of it.
This was this picture. I'm gonna mess it up now. This is a picture of Dad with his first shop, and that's Mom in the picture holding on to a trailer that Dad had built. Is that a pipe moving trailer?
Yeah, it's a pipe moving trailer.
And that's what you did for your business. You welded
Yes.
and made things for local farmers, mostly. Worked on their equipment and fixed their equipment.
When I first started business for myself, I had a mobile business. I had a welder, a portable welder, and a cutting torch and grinder and drill and everything. And I'd go out and repair farm machinery right on the farm. And it was a good deal because right at that time they was breaking out a lot of ground around Blackfoot and putting it under sprinkler system, and so I went out and welded that sprinkler system together, and I had to do that when they had the pump shut off, which was usually really early in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon when I wasn't busy welding pipe, well then I'd work in the shop, and then whenever they called me, I'd leave what I was working on and go out and do whatever they wanted me to do. That's the way I worked it.
This is a picture of a boat trailer Dad built.
What
was after that? Remember?
I worked at my own business for a couple of years, and I don't remember the years, but let's see, it must have been, I don't remember the exact years. I had my own business, and I worked summers. I had plenty of work to do. In the winters, I didn't have much work to do, so consequently, I found me a job to work during the wintertime, which was doing furnace repair and installing furnaces. And I worked for him at least 2 or 3 winters, and about that time my brother Owen was working in Idaho Falls at a place called Mel Brown's Irrigation, and they wanted a machinist and a welder to work at their shop. And he told me that I could talk to him and maybe I'd probably could get a job. He thought I could get a good job there. So I did talk to him, and they hired me to come up to go to work at Idaho Falls, and that made it so that we wouldn't have to go into debt to build a shop, which was where we was at. If I stayed in business for myself, I felt like that I either had to go into debt and build a bigger shop to work in so that I could work year-round in it, or I'd have to get a job and work year-round, because it was uncertain to try and do anything between jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It was either feast or famine. You had a lot of work and then you didn't have any. And I also was having trouble collecting some of my bills after I got them. And the funny part of that was it seemed like the people who I thought could afford to pay the best was the hardest ones to get money out of.
The farmers that you'd done work for?
Mm-hmm. So anyway, when I talked to Mel Brown about coming up to work for him, well, he made it sound so good, and they was combining with a big factory in California, and it was going to get bigger and bigger, and he needed me to come up and run his machine shop and do his machine work and get things started on his welding and everything. So that's what I did. And that's what I did until from 1960 till 1968, and that's when, after then, well, I kept having a lot of trouble with Mel Brown, because in the summertime, well, he wanted us to all work on a salary, at so much of a salary, so we didn't get an hourly wage. So then he'd have us work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, and it was so busy that every time we had a few hours off, well, we'd gather up everybody and leave, so we couldn't get called back in to go to work. And then in the wintertime, when it started to slow down, well, he would lay everybody off except the ones he wanted to keep on year round, and then we'd still have to work long hours to keep our jobs, because he'd lay off so many people and we had so much work to do that we couldn't get it done. So after a couple of 3 years of that, I threatened him, because he didn't want us to ever take vacation during the summertime, or the fall, because that was the busy time. But you can't take a vacation in the wintertime if you've got kids that are going to school and everything. So I told him, well, all right, then I'm quitting. I'm going on vacation. So I went on vacation, and when I come back, well, he hired me back. So, and that's the way I almost felt like I had to do that, but he hired me back a couple, 3 times, and then finally I just said that was enough of that, and I got a job working for the city of Idaho Falls in 1968, and I worked there for 23 years until I retired in 1992.
Okay, now I got a picture. Tell me about the photograph.
Well, that particular photograph there is a picture of myself and By Farnsworth. We was overhauling one of the turbines at the city of Idaho Falls at the main plant there, and we had to make our own tools to do it because they didn't have anything to do it with. So I made the tools and did the job without them making me any tools.
You worked for the city of Idaho Falls till you retired, didn't you?
Yes. I worked there from until the middle of 1992, which gave me enough points so that I could retire, and then I was 62 years old, and so I went ahead and retired.
Okay. Alright, now I've got a bunch of camping and hunting pictures here, fishing pictures and stuff I want to show. Let's turn this off for a second. There's a family photograph. Oh, let's see, Carolyn's a baby, so that had to be 74 3 or 4. What, do you remember when she was born? That's the whole
60,
bunch.
Christopher was born in 68.
So that's the whole bunch right there. This was just before Terry went on his mission. Here's a picture of Dad. Photograph says, "To a nice dad, the best. Happy 26th." So I'm guessing that's 26th birthday. This picture's, I don't know if that's a couple years earlier or a couple years later. There's another photograph of him. And here he is with Colleen and Celia. This is a picture of Grandpa Brunson. This is Clarence A Brunson. Now, I believe this is the dollar hole, is not, Dad?
Yeah, it's up. It's a couple of miles above Suicide Rock, where they used to fish off of the rock at above Chalice on the Salmon River.
That looks like a pretty good sized
And
salmon he's got.
we camped right in there at that place, and
Is that our tents in the background?
yeah, probably is. They called it the dollar hole because those people that owned that ground charged us $1 a day to fish there. And
Well, that was pretty expensive for the back then, wasn't it?
yeah, but they let us camp there and everything though for it.
What do you? This photograph says 1959 on it. Now you fished there. That was your summer vacation every year, wasn't it?
Yeah, we used to go up there every year around the 4th of July. And that's another picture. That's a picture of me. We used to tail them with our hands, you know, and just grab them by the tail and lift them out of the water.
So is this the middle of summer?
Well, it's it's around the 4th of July.
That's always when you went to catch salmon. So
That's when we had our best luck.
You're helping that guy there catch that fish.
Yeah, I think that's my brother-in-law Gary Sayer.
All right. You can see in this picture that there's a few other fishermen around there too.
Yeah, we had to take turns fishing there all the time. There was always a lot of people fishing there.
But you did catch a lot of fish there, didn't you?
Yeah, we caught our share.
It's back when they used to have a salmon run in Idaho. This is how we used to go camping when I was a youngster. You want to tell us, this is your pickup?
Yeah, well, that we went in. We had another truck before that we went camping in a lot too. But I bought that truck in '64. It's a '64 model. But the person that had it before me didn't like it because he had tools stolen out of the back of it all the time. So he wanted a van, so he traded it in, and I bought it, and it was still a '64, and I gave $1,300 for it.
So it's practically brand new.
A year old. It wasn't even a year old. Yeah, it had been used, but it hadn't been used a year.
Well, now, if I remember right, you correct me if I'm wrong, the boys used to sleep in the tent.
Yeah.
And then the girls would sleep in the camper with Mom and Dad.
Yeah, that's how it was.
I don't suppose you know where that picture was taken.
No, I don't. I don't know where that was at. We was everywhere.
Yeah.
We went everywhere fishing and including Mackey and Island Park and Palisades.
Okay. So there's Grandpa with a fish he caught. And this is an old Willie's Jeep. 48, wasn't it, Dad?
No, it was a 52.
Okay.
Willie's Jeep station wagon.
He's got a big old grin on his face. catch a nice trout. There's Grandpa or Dad with a few geese. Probably the limit was 4 then.
No,
of course it is now too.
I think the limit was 2 then, but that's probably mine and Dad's limit.
Oh, okay. Now, you said you hunted geese and ducks a lot as a kid, and I remember you telling me some stories about Grandpa. You were the bird dog.
Yeah, I was the bird dog. I went hunting a lot of times, never had a gun. I just went down there to be with him. Hunting, and we'd lay down there in the cold all day and hunt geese, and I never did have a gun until I was
home from the service.
Yeah, until after I come home from the service. This here's a time that we went up hunting early one morning, and as you can see, I've got chains all the way around on that Jeep. That's that same one that you seen earlier. That 52 Willys Jeep station wagon, and we was going up that side of the creek, and it was getting steeper all the time, and I thought to myself I should get down in the creek, so I slowed up. If I'd have kept going, I don't think that I'd have tipped over, but anyway, about the time that I stopped, it started sliding sideways and slid right down and tipped over in the Jeep, as you see it there. The top of it's down in the Jeep, in the
creek.
In the creek, in the water.
Who was in the outfit with you?
Owen was with me, and a fellow by the name of Floyd Beck was with me. And I was the only one that got out and didn't have a lump on my head, because when I turned loose at the door, it fell back just about the time Owen got to where he could get hit square in the head with the door, and when he got out, he'd let it fall on the guy that was right behind him, hit him right in the head.
All right, tell me about.
Nobody was hurt though.
Yeah, let's stop for a minute. Ed, tell us about this story. I know there's got quite a story behind it.
Well, that was a story. I went hunting with this guy, the only time I ever went hunting with him, and I haven't been hunting with him since. And he knew this place where we could go hunting, so he had a Jeep, and we pulled it up to where we was going to go hunting on a trailer. I pulled it up behind my truck, and we left about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got up there. It was up Railroad Canyon where we was going, up behind Leadore, and we got up there just about daylight, and we had already had our lunch with us, so we just decided to go ahead and go hunting before we made camp. We'd make camp that night when we come back. So we hunted pretty much all day, and it was almost getting dark when we decided to come back and make camp so we could fix supper, and then we could go hunting the next day. And when we come down off of the mountain, we see these 3 elk out about 500 or 600 yards away from us. And of course they seen us too, but they didn't pay much attention to us from that distance. But this guy figured he knew what they was going to do. He says those elk, as quick as they hear this outfit, they'll go right over that hill. And so if we want to get a chance to shoot these elk, you and Dick get out and go towards where I told you they's going to go over that hill, and I'll drive the Jeep on down to that next fence, and then I'll drive the fence line up to the edge of that hill, and I'll pick you up there if you don't get any shooting. Well, I was the only one that had a scope on my rifle, and Dick and I was going along together there, and not too far apart, and Dick thought he seen something up ahead, and he says, "Look at that through your scope, see what it is." Well, when I looked, it was that spike bull elk, and so I didn't say anything. I just shot. I shot that elk right in the neck, but it wasn't a killing shot. He bled to death later on, but the elk, all 3 of them, then they run on down into the swale, and Dick and I, we ended up killing all 3 of them. But they was down in this swale, and we had to go down there and clean them and get back out of there, because that swale, the other side of that swale, was Montana, and we wasn't supposed to be hunting over there.
You didn't know that it was Montana, did you?
I didn't know it was Montana, and neither did Dick, but this guy did. He says, "Oh, them are in Montana. We got to get out of here with them elk." So So was what we did was we went ahead and cleaned them, and then he drove down there with that Land Rover, and when he went to drive out of there, he was going to take one elk out at a time. But when he went to go out of there, the Land Rover, the pump wouldn't work on it, and so it couldn't get no gasoline. So what I finally ended up doing was, when we'd get in a level spot, well, I'd fill up a Coke bottle with gasoline, and then I'd feed gasoline into the carburetor as we went up the hill in the steeper parts to give it enough gas so that we could make it up there, and that's the way we got out with them. And it was about 9-10 o'clock by the time we got them all out, but we did get them all out that night, and by doing that, and then we got back to the trailer and we decided, well, we're done hunting, we might just as well go home. So then we drove on home that night.
Never even
stopped for setting up camp. We just loaded the truck back, or the Land Rover back on the trailer, and drove back home. And we got home about midnight.
All right, we're showing some pictures here. Dad, why don't you just talk about them?
Well, that picture there is a picture of the fish that we caught at Oregon. We went over there as a bunch of us. I don't remember now. There was about 12 or 14 of us that went over with Levon Nichols in Idaho Falls. And that's some of the fish that we caught. We had 2 freezers that we took over on the trailer, and we plugged them in when we got over there, and then we froze those fish and brought them back frozen. That's another picture
of the same bunch of fish?
The same bunch of guys with the fish, yeah. Do you want me to point out me?
You see right here?
Yeah, that's me right there.
Okay. Want to tell us about this one?
These are some halibut that we caught up in Alaska, and I don't remember any of the weights on those. That second one from the left there is a king salmon that I caught.
I think I got another picture of that one. There's you guys.
Yeah, that's a picture of us in front of the sign where you go down off of the hill into Homer, Alaska, and out onto the spit to catch the boat to go fishing.
So there's Owen, Dickie, you, and Danny.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's another bunch of halibut and salmon that we caught up there at that same place in Alaska.
There they are in the boat, huh?
Yeah, that's a picture of them on a boat. And that one there, this is a lingcod right here.
Oh, okay, I see it there.
That's a picture of the place where we stayed. We stayed in a camp up there, and we did our own cooking.
This is the kitchen?
But they provided our breakfast, and that's the kitchen there where we did the cooking, and they provided the breakfast, but we had to provide our dinners. That's another picture of that salmon that I caught up there.
Oh, I didn't know you caught one. I thought Owen was the only one that got lucky enough to do that.
No, I caught one up there one time. We went up there 2 different times.
Okay, here's another picture.
That's a picture of a bunch of reds that we caught up there.
Oh. Okay.
They're not as big as the king salmon. They only get to be about 12 pounds, between 8 and 12 pounds.
This is the one you were telling me that the river was just red with fish.
Yeah, they're just coming up the river real thick, and you fish for them, and you have to catch them in the head. But they was going up the river, and their jaws was opening and shutting, and the trick was to get your line in their jaws so that you could pull the hook through there and catch them.
Because they really wouldn't bite anything?
No, they wouldn't chew on anything. That's a picture of a moose set of moose horns that I found in the forest around where we was camped, and so I thought, well, that's a pretty nice big set. I'd get a picture of them. So that's what that is.
All right. Got a picture here.
Well, that's Owen and Dick and I went up to down below Shoup on the Salmon River, and that's 3 steelhead that we caught up there. We didn't have too good of luck, but we caught those 3. And that's brown trout that I caught up to Clark Canyon Reservoir trolling. Now, this is a picture of a salmon that I caught out at Tillamook Bay in Oregon. And these are some more pictures of that same fish. It was a beautiful fish, 60 pound it weighed.
We weren't even going to fish that day.
Yeah, that particular day we wasn't going to fish. That was a day that we hadn't reserved to go fishing. But the guide that was up there that particular day didn't have enough clients to go out, and so we decided to go, and that's how come we caught that fish. I have it mounted on my wall now.
Okay, now we're going to show a few pictures of fish that Grandpa's caught at Flathead Lake in Montana.
Now those fish there are less than 36 inches long, so we had to throw them back. And so we didn't have very much time to mess around with them. We had to hurry up and get them unhooked and throw them back in the lake before they died. That's Grandma holding one. They're almost 36 inches long, but not quite. And we had to throw them back. There's another one that was
too small to keep.
Too small to keep. We did catch some that was big enough to keep, though.
I got a couple of those pictures too.
There's a couple more that was too small to keep.
Is that a bull trout, or is that a?
No, I don't think it's a bull trout. I think they're all. I didn't take any pictures of any bull trout. Now these are some that we got to keep. Christopher's holding a couple that we got to keep.
There's another one that was too small.
There's another one that was too small. Another one that's too small.
Couple that were big enough.
There's some that was big enough. That's another one that is too small. This is some more that was big enough to keep.
Okay. Now I'm going to show a few hunting pictures.
Well, you turned it off, right?
No.
Now those are.
This was
I think that
1977. I remember.
I think that was when we went up Medicine Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
You can see you're only about 12 or so there in that
Man,
picture.
I was 15.
15, was you?
Yeah.
Boy, he's getting old.
Yeah, I was really old by then.
Yeah.
Terry, Burdette, CR, and Dad. And Terry, he found one of them deer that was unlucky, I think. So did Burdette. Mine was skill, however. That little tiny one over there. That's the advantage you get when you're making the tape. Here's another picture of Grandpa with a nice little buck he shot up Stump Creek. There's some geese that Grandpa and Dickie got. That looks like Swan Valley. Is that Swan Valley?
Oh, yeah, I think that was up Swan Valley.
Okay.
There's Uncle Reed, and there's Reed.
And here's another nice little buck Grandpa got.
Yeah, we got those got that in up Stump Creek too.
And here is some elk. Thomas and Grandpa.
The elk we got up Stump Creek.
Yeah, that was this year.
Yeah, that was this year.
Real recent picture there. Now I've got some pictures I want to show of Grandpa's moose. That was 1990, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, we only got to hunt about 20-30 minutes on that one until we had it, and spent the rest of the day getting it butchered out so as we could put it in bags and cool it out. And that was the end of our hunt. In 20 minutes it was done with, a 30. We found him right close to where we started up the hill, and so we killed it and packed it out in 6 packs, 6 quarters.
We have that all on videotape too.
Yeah.
Who's this, Dad?
That's my grandpa and grandma, John Lewis and Emma Jane Wilden Brunson.
John Lewis Brunson?
Yes.
Okay. And this is 2 of their children, right?
Yeah, this is my dad and his sister, Emma Jane Brunson.
Oh, she's pretty.
Mm-hmm.
That was Clarence A Brunson.
Yeah.
Probably had to be about the turn of the century. No.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, about the
because
turn
he
of
was
century?
born in 97, I think.
So this had to be about in the year 1900. Now who's that?
Oh, these are older pictures of Grandpa and Grandma, but I think they're about the same.
That's John Lewis Brunson.
Yeah.
And this is Emma Jane Clues when she was a little older.
Yeah, that's
Right
his
here.
wife when she was older. Well, one of the stories that has been going around Idaho Falls about all of the people at the electric light department know about it was we had a beaver that was giving us some trouble up there to the out to the city power plant, and they planted after the flood in 1976. Well, they rebuilt part of done some rebuilding around the plants, and they had set some trees along the driveway into the plant, and this beaver was getting out of the river and going up and cutting off those trees and taking it down, and there's just new seedlings, and so we called the Fish and Game, and they was going to come down and trap the beaver. But one night they never did get it trapped, and one night the beaver was up eating on these trees, and I decided I was going to catch it. So we had the bottom of a 50-gallon drum that we had cut off to use to wash parts in. It was only about 8 inches deep, 6 or 8 inches deep. And so I took that drum and went out and to trap this beaver, and it must have been quite a sight to see. There was a guy that seen it. But anyway, the beaver was looking at me, and I was looking at the beaver, and pretty quick he made a dash for the river, and I jumped right on top of him with that pan, and that beaver had enough strength to pack me in the pan and everything right to the river, and I jumped off just before we went in the river, and the beaver got away, and then we never did get it. So
well, he did. He disappeared.
He got away.
He drug up after that, didn't he?
Yeah,
he never came around and cut it
he
out.
didn't never come around get no more trees after that. But
so he's we must have scared the spit out of him.
He either scratched his feet up, dragging me around, or something.
Okay.
So that was the end of that story.
There's some pretty fond memories which I have. I'd like you to talk a little bit about. When Grandma got sick, when she got a brain tumor, and I know that you and your brothers and sisters got together and talked about what you were going to do, and you decided that you were going to each take her to each of your homes.
Yeah, she had a brain tumor about the size of your fist, and when they operated on her, they said that the brain tumor would grow back, and she probably only had a year to live. But we thought that we was going to take every advantage of all the odds, and we wanted to give her cancer therapy or chemotherapy, and so we had radiation treatments, and so we had to take her to Pocatello to do that. And
that was really hard on her because she didn't want to do it, but we talked her into it because we thought that it was probably her best chance at surviving, because she had only retired 2 months. She retired at 2 months when she had this operation, and for all practical purposes it ended up being the end of her retirement, because she got that tumor and she went to the hospital and had it operated on and taken out, and then she had chemotherapy in Pocatello, and when they got done doing all they could do down there to her, then she come home, and we decided that we'd take her into our homes, each one of us, and take care of her until she got better. We figured that she'd get better, at least she'd have some length of life that would be enjoyable for her. But
now, between the time she had been diagnosed and treated, she'd also kind of given up because Grandpa died right there too.
Well, he didn't die until after she was at Pocatello, going to Pocatello, because it ended up he didn't take care of himself, and he got congestive heart failure, and he died. She never even got to go to his funeral because she was in the hospital doing that chemotherapy.
Well, now, I wonder if you remember some of the same things I do. Do you remember giving her priesthood blessings and blessing her to recover?
Yeah, we tried everything that we thought would work, but...
Do you remember coming to me and saying, we've been doing, when it was finally all done, and it was pretty obvious that she was going to die, and we were just prolonging her life. Do you remember coming to me and saying, we've been doing it all wrong. We've been trying to keep her here, and we've been selfish. And
well, I don't remember whether I thought that we was selfish. I thought that we was doing
the right
as
thing,
much as we could to, until such a time she was after she'd stayed at our place for a period of time. Then she went out and stayed at Owen and Inga's place for a period of time, and at that time the tumor had grown back to where it was blocking the optic nerve in her brain, and it was starting to make her go blind. And she wanted to go to the doctor to get her eyes checked, and she kept telling Inga that she needed to turn on the light. It was getting awful dark in there, and it was just because she was going blind.
Do you remember her calling for her sister? I remember
her calling for Dad several times, and she kept saying that he was in the room with her after that time when she went what I figured she was completely blind, and that was she went out to stay at Donna's after that, and that's where she kept saying that Dad was right up there. She said he was up in the corner of the room watching her. So
I remember that she I took her potty when I come home from school.
Yeah.
And every day when I'd come home, she'd ask me the same question. She'd say, "See, Art, is that you?" And yeah. And she'd say, "How long ago did you tell me Grandpa died?" And she'd say, well, or I'd tell her how long he'd been dead. And finally, after several weeks of asking me the same question, she looked me right in the eye and she said, "Why did you lie to me?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, Grandma, I didn't lie to you. I carried him to the grave. I was a pallbearer. I watched him put him in the ground." And she looked me real stern right in the eye. She says, "Well, then why is he standing behind you?"
Yeah.
And
I remember said several times that she seen him in the room. And
I remember you were there. I didn't know what to say to her, but you were there, and you told her, "Well, Grandma, maybe you can see him, but we can't." And I can also remember her calling for her sister. I think she had a sister named Louise. Is that right?
No.
That was her mother.
Oh, was that her mother?
That was her mother.
She kept hollering for Louise, like Louise was in the room, but Louise wouldn't talk to her. Wouldn't. She was right there, but she couldn't get her attention.
Yeah, that might have been.
And for me, that experience taught me just how close people who are dead
get to the other side before they die. They can get pretty close, and they can see people on the other side before they're there themselves.
Yeah.
Because see, she was operated on in April, and she lived 2 days past the next April. Wasn't it 2 days?
Yeah, it was something like that.
Anyway, it's just exactly like what the doctor said. She just barely lived a year.
But he said she would have a good year, and she had a good, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah, she didn't have any good life after the hospital operation and all of that.
I think she
Well-
enjoyed that first 6 weeks that she was out there with us.
Yeah, she might have done.
And it was a good experience for us too. It taught me a few other things too. That we have responsibilities far beyond what everybody thinks. I think we had a responsibility to care for her, and I think you guys really showed that forth very well.
There was us and Owen and Inga and Donna was all that took her into our.
Well, those were the only ones we got a chance to, and
Winona was working.
Winona was working, and she didn't get a chance. I think
And Millie and Dickie were both working.
Yeah.
But not until everybody joined hands, after she was so bad and she didn't hardly even know us, not until everybody joined hands and we prayed that if she wouldn't get better. Because we had prayed
We give her
for
priesthood
thy
blessing,
will,
too.
our will, not thy will be done.
Yeah.
And not until everybody joined hands around her bed did she pass away.
I remember that we gave her priesthood blessing in that effect, and it was after that she finally passed away.
if I had anything to tell my posterity is I'd tell them that they need to listen for the voices that talk to them when they talk to themselves, because if you talk to yourself and you listen to what answers you get, you'll get the still small voice that's inside of you that tells you what you need to do. And if you have sincere thoughts that you'll do the right thing, but if you listen to those promptings. And I also would like to say that I think that you never want to say you can't do anything until after you've tried, because no matter how forbidding and how big a chore it looks like, if you try hard enough, that usually you can do a lot more than you think. I don't think it'd make any difference how hard you tried to fly. You wouldn't be able to fly, but if you've got to get a job done, if you keep doing a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, pretty quick you'll have the job done. The more you persevere and keep after it, I think that you can do a lot of things that look big. The job looks big in the beginning, but if you keep after it, you can get it done.
It's a nice looking moose.
This is the big forkhorn that Dad shot up at Stump Creek. It's 31 inches wide and about 22, 23 inches tall. This is another buck Dad shot up to Stump Creek. 1990. This is big Chinook, 60-pound Chinook. And his little brown.